Hi, I'm Escambia County Sheriff David Morgan, and welcome to Ask the Sheriff. You know, this segment normally comes after our ECSO news. Unfortunately, we've had a couple of injuries here at the Sheriff's Office, and so Amber Southard and Allison Morgan and Major Andrew Hobbs are not available to do their segment. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a montage together of the Ask the Sheriff segments. These are most frequently asked questions that we get at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, and so we think it's appropriate that we give you the answers that we've had instead of, again, trying to reassemble them, if you will. We would also invite you to join us through social media. A couple of ways you can do that. Go to escambiaso.com. That's our official website at the Sheriff's Office. Or you can join us on Facebook. And when you go to that website, you can also link into the Facebook. We encourage you to be interactive with us. When you're on Facebook and you have a question, or if you observe something in our county that you would like to know about, involving law enforcement obviously, please give us a call. We'd be happy to answer your question. Also understand that we research the answers to our questions. Why? Because we think the truth does matter to Escambia County Sheriff's Office. We're involved in civil rights. We're involved in keeping every citizen's rights. And so it's important that we're right every time. So as your sheriff, I promise you that we will always strive to provide the best law enforcement that we can to the citizens of Escambia County. So welcome to Ask the Sheriff, and this is a montage of our best. Thank you very much. Susan asked, where can she report narcotics activity due to some activity in the area where she lives? Susan, I certainly, commiserate with you if you're living in an area where there is narcotics activity. I will also tell you, unfortunately, Susan, in today's world, that we have narcotics activity in all areas of Escambia County, in the city of Pensacola, in the city of Century, everywhere in our community, throughout the state and throughout our nation. Drugs and drug usage has unfortunately become a fact of our social fabric and culture anymore. So I say that only to let you know that it's not unique to your area. Illegal activity occurs in our highest affluent areas in Pensacola to the lowest. Of course, it's illegal activity, and so we would appreciate you giving us a call. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. Since it's a non-emergency, you can call 436-9620. That is Central Dispatch. Ask for no officer contact. Ask to speak with a supervisor, and you can report then a specific incidence of narcotics activity. Or again, you can call Crime Stoppers. You can report that anonymously, ask for no contact, and we will honor that. Again, I will assure you that we will look into this. Now, by the way, immediate action normally doesn't occur with narcotics tips. Why? Because there's a whole process that we have to go through in order to build a case that will assure that the state attorney's office can successfully prosecute those cases. Now, barring you getting any satisfaction from those numbers, Susan, if you feel that you're still not being listened to, please call my office at 436-9512, and you'll speak to Anita. Let her know that you made a call into the Ask the Sheriff's program and you would like for us to look personally into this thing. But I can guarantee you, Susan, that we will take your complaint and it will be looked into. Okay, Jerry asked about the differentiation and the splitting of law enforcement duties and responsibilities between the Florida Highway Patrol and the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. And Jerry, you erroneously put in your question that there was only one Florida Highway Patrol officer, available to work traffic accidents in Escambia County. That's not true. I can tell you that the Florida Highway Patrol has more officers assigned than that. And we do, in fact, work traffic accidents. It's just rarely. That's an agreement that we have with the state of Florida, and specifically with the Florida Highway Patrol and the Department of Transportation, that they are specifically the experts in traffic control and also the working of traffic accidents. To be, again, perfectly candid with you, if there's a vehicular homicide, there's no one within our agency right now, in our department, that has the background training or qualifications to adequately investigate something such as a vehicular homicide. We depend upon the Florida Highway Patrol to do that. That's part of the splitting of responsibilities throughout the different state and local agencies. And also it's a cost-saving measure. That way our agency doesn't have to be all things to all people, just like with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We don't have a DNA lab. We don't have certain capabilities here, which saves our local taxpayers money, and we defer that analysis to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Just like in the areas of traffic enforcement, etc., we apply the Florida Highway Patrol to those specific issues. While we can work certain vehicle accidents, we almost always defer to the Florida Highway Patrol because they are the experts in traffic management and accident investigation. Samantha has a question about speeding in her neighborhood. Samantha, you also erroneously spoke to, and I want to correct this, because you don't have to pay for speed bumps. The process you have to go through is get a hold of your county commissioner. In the area that you mentioned in your question is an overlapping area. You may be in District 2 or District 3, but that really doesn't matter. You can call Commissioner Doug Underhill. He's currently serving as the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners for the next year. Commissioner Underhill will assist you in getting the appropriate survey completed in your neighborhood. A certain number of your neighbors, I'm not sure what the number is now, if it's 55 or 60%, have to agree that speed bumps would be required on your street. So there's several legal humps that you have to go through for the ordinance to get approved, if you will, for your particular area. Also to including responding emergency vehicles, not so much the sheriff's office, but the fire department. Fire department doesn't like speed bumps, by the way, because when they're responding to a fire, or the EMS folks are responding with an ambulance, they don't really care for anything that impedes their ability to get there. And I will also tell you that as a homeowner, I don't want the fire truck driving slow if my house is on fire. So they have a tremendous amount of say, because it also flexes the frame on their vehicles, and it can warp the frames on a fire truck. So speed bumps being put in is a pretty technical, complicated area to go into, specifically the street itself, the weight loads and all that stuff. But you don't have to pay for those. If that's approved, they're installed through Roads and Bridges and the Board of County Commissioners. So when you complain about speeding in that area, we have your location now from your question. We'll notify our traffic division, and we'll come out there and write some tickets. We can set up some speeding units out there to run some radar. But let me tell you, Samantha, what's going to happen. We're going to go out there and spend a couple of days in your neighborhood and quite possibly write a tremendous number of tickets. And for the next couple of weeks to a month, speeding will drop dramatically off, because people say, hey, they're focusing on our area. And then after about 60 to 90 days, your problem will pick back up. What you're really outlining, Samantha, is a loss of respect for our community, and a loss of self-control. While we're there to enforce laws, remember, laws are written for the lawless. And so we'll come out and assist you all that we can. It really has to do with good neighbors being good neighbors. And again, good neighbors don't speed in neighborhoods when they know that there are children playing and someone could be injured. So we'll come out and assist you. But again, I just want to warn you, it's not going to solve your problem. It'll be a temporary fix. What occurs is, again, when we have sensibilities as a society, that's not the appropriate thing to do. David asked, do we offer safety services in Escambia County as they do in other locales? The answer, David, is yes. Anytime you're going to be absent from your house, we can place you on what's called a watch list, meaning that you advise us of your house location, your house number. Make sure that you're in the county, by the way, but I understand the Pensacola Police Department does the same thing, so you can also do this there. And just let us know the dates that you're going to be gone, and we add you to a watch list. And so when our officers are patrolling in your neighborhood, we'll go by occasionally and check and make sure that, again, the house is secure. Sometimes, with the permission of the homeowner, if you have a driveway or a carport, our officers will even back in or park in your area while they call in their reports, again, to give a known presence of law enforcement in your particular area. I would also recommend that if you have a neighborhood watch in your area, also let your neighborhood watch captain know that you're going to be out of town for a particular time. And then your neighborhood watch group is also watching your house while you're gone. Remember, collectively as a community, it's all of these services that we all provide, both personal, private, and again, government services, that keeps our community safe. So I encourage you to use all of those and avail yourself to them. question about officers and officers' driving habits and patterns from Austin and Julie. Their questions are different, but basically the gist is they've observed deputies, driving, improperly or erratically. While I certainly encourage and appreciate, you bringing this to my attention, but understand something, there's little or nothing that I can do about this if you can't give me some information about who the officer is. I will assure you that everyone goes through the driving courses at the sheriff's office. They're expected, again, because they enforce the law, to obey the law themselves, if anything, to go above and beyond the obeyance of the law, because again, we set the example for our entire community. So what I need for you to do, and again, you can do this anonymously. You don't have to call in and say, hey, this is John Jones, and I saw Deputy so-and-so, and I want to file a formal complaint. Understanding that there is some intimidation factor here, and people don't want to report law enforcement for these sorts of infractions. But I need you to get me a number off of the vehicle. It's always on the back of a deputy's cruiser, and then that way I can specifically, and by the way, I just fielded one of those complaints today I received from someone on the west side of town about a deputy that had been engaged in some activity with their cruiser that was inappropriate for the deputy to do. And so we're handling that now through our operations division, through Commander Lee Weston and Colonel Bain Custer. We intend to, correct that officer's behavior, and hopefully it'll be a one-time event and we'll never have to speak of this again. But you have to give me some information that I can deal with, whether it's erratic driving, tailgating someone, not using their emergency gear, etc. I would be more than happy to intervene in those things and pass it on to the appropriate people at the sheriff's office. But otherwise, now what I'll put out is a blanket thing reminding officers that their driving patterns and habits are always being watched by the citizens that we serve. That's kind of like it bounces off. Again, I need to deal with a specific problem. Why? Because if I was sitting in muster today and you read that pass on to me, I'd think, well, I don't do that, so that doesn't apply to me, and so I move on to the next thing. But again, if I get called out of muster by my sergeant or lieutenant, and I'm advised that a complaint was received on me, it was car number whatever that's assigned to you, and you were observed during this time doing this, this, and this, then I'm basically being counseled. I'm being put on notice that my driving patterns have been reported, and if we hear about this pattern again, then it could lead to a written counseling and or a reprimand, and possibly cycling me back through the driving course. So again, you got to give me some specific information. I'd be more than happy to address this situation with the officers at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, because I always encourage citizens to make complaints. I can't fix problems that I'm not aware of. So thank you for your concern, but again, you need to get me a car number before I can move to the next step on correcting these issues. Dale and Ann, we have two questions that came in over the email that basically are asking the same question about handicap parking. We're very fortunate. While your question obviously deals with a specific problem that you've identified, we don't get a lot of those calls. We just ran some statistics on that not too long ago. We have parking enforcement specialists, which are volunteers that work at no pay. We put them through a short training course here, about 2 weeks long. And they do wear uniforms and have badges. They're non-armed and non-sworn, by the way, which means they don't have powers of arrest. But they go out and monitor parking, and they issue those citations. If you're in downtown Pensacola, so I'm not sure where your question was and what it applies to, the Downtown Improvement Board in the city of Pensacola, within the city proper, actually regulates those parking spaces if you park downtown. Again, I'm not sure what your locale is here. But if you see that occur the next time, we would ask that you have no contact with the person that's violating the parking space. If they don't have a, remember, you look for two things. Number one, a license plate on the back of the car that shows that it's a handicap plate, or they'll have a placard that they're to hang from the rear view mirror of the car. And that's so that an officer that responds can readily identify if the vehicle itself is authorized to park there. Again, do not confront or contact that person while it's laudable for you to question that when someone who's obviously able-bodied gets out of a car and walks into a business or a business establishment. We ask that you not do that. Get the license number and the make of the car. Give us a call. Now, if a uniformed officer has time and is not on a call, they'll actually come by, and of course they can also enforce parking. But we ask that you ask for a parking enforcement specialist to come by. That's their one sole mission, is to go out and issue these citations. And again, they're not going from call to call to call like law enforcement is. They could be responding to an armed disturbance, a domestic violence, a robbery in progress. Could be a whole host of things that they're responding to. The parking enforcement specialists are doing only that. So ask for that you have a parking issue that you need an officer to respond to. Give them the make and the license number of the vehicle, and we'll make contact with that individual as soon as possible. Trust me, I know how irritating it is to see an able-bodied person parked there, or someone who doesn't have any markings on the vehicle at all. What I find particularly irritating for me is when someone's driving mom or dad's car, or they got a plate based upon their mother or father, and then they use that to get an easy parking space everywhere that they go. That's a perversion of the system too. Why? Because those spaces are meant for people who truly have a handicap, who have a walker or a cane, or have to use crutches, or if they have a wheelchair, so they can get in and use the wheelchair lift, out of a side door, etc. So it is irritating. That's unfortunately another sad commentary on the de-evolution of society, where we don't care enough about our fellow citizens or our fellow men and women that we would abuse that privilege.
What is the purpose of all the billboards?
Marcus, the billboards that we have are part of an ongoing program started a little over 2 years ago at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. Currently we're pushing a national program called Lock It. As you well know, it was in the news about 18 months ago. We just had a terrible spate of car burglaries and also home burglaries, where people were leaving their vehicles and their homes unsecured. If you were lucky, you had your car burglarized. Many times they were left unlocked, obviously, because that's the name of the program. Other times they left homes unlocked, and homes were actually burglarized. So as part of a nationwide effort and some research by my staff, what are the ways that we want to get the word out to our community to support law enforcement in these efforts to see a downward trend in burglaries and somewhat home invasions also. And so the FBI, believe it or not, is one of the organizations that strongly recommended the use of billboards, that it was one of the quickest and fastest ways to get a message out to a community that was consistent and sustained throughout your program. And so we took what's called LET money, which is our trust fund money. It's from drug forfeitures. When we do drug bust and we get both assets, which can be cash, but it could also be cars and homes, etc., which we later dispose of, that money is the one what's referred to as a discretionary fund that I have at the Sheriff's Office by Florida statute, that I can spend it for local programs. And so we give to a whole host of different programs for youth diversion. I spoke to the last question. A lot of our contributions to the Florida Sheriff Youth Ranch also comes from our trust fund money, which is drug forfeiture money. None of the money that we have spent on the billboards are from our ad valorem taxes, meaning that what we do is we do not spend your taxpayers' money on the billboards. And so, by the way, for those who are detractors of this program, we've noticed a drop at mid-year of over 26% in our burglaries. So we believe the program's working. By the way, prior to the billboards, we've been advertising in all the local theaters, not only for our Most Wanted program, which we also partner with our Crime Stoppers, but also programs that we use our trust money for. One of these being included, a Lock It program. So the billboards was the last follow-on, if you will, to our social media program on how do we get the word out to our community and get our community on board to do a very simple thing called, Lock It. Lock your vehicles, lock your homes, and, keep it yours.
What's the Sheriff's Office opinion on what citizens should do if they have a concealed handgun license and they're carrying a concealed weapon and they get pulled over by the police?
The safest thing to always do is to follow the officer's directions when they approach your car, meaning keep your hands in plain view. An officer will ask for certain items. If it's a traffic stop, they'll ask for your license, registration, proof of insurance, etc. Only do those things that the officer asks for, again, and do not make any quick movements while the officer is approaching your car or while the officer is talking to you. What we have many citizens do is if they are carrying concealed at that time, meaning the weapon is actually on them, or let's say the weapon is in a console or in a glove compartment, they will advise an officer that I'm a licensed to carry gun owner and that my gun is in the car and I'm wanting to advise you of that. And many times with their license, they'll hand the officer their concealed carry to, again, show proof to the officer that, hey, I have been licensed to carry this weapon. That's a safe thing to do, but it's also at that point you need to make sure that the officer knows that you're not reaching for the weapon, and the officer, may come over and ask if they can assist you in getting that, or they may have you step out of the car and do some additional checks. So in order to remain safe, if you're carrying a concealed weapon with contact with law enforcement, advise the officer of who you are, that you in fact are licensed to carry, that you are currently carrying a weapon, and then follow the directions of the officer. That's the safest thing that you can do.
When I'm driving and I see a erratic driver, who do I call? Do I call 911, or is there any information I need to know, or what do I need to do?
Datari asked, what should he do when he's out in his vehicle and he observes erratic driving, someone crossing the center line or running off the road? Should you dial 911, and then what specifically or what action should you take? Number one, be safe. We always recommend that you back away from that driver. Do not try to pass. So stay behind the vehicle. Again, get out of that lane if at all possible, as quickly as possible. And yes, dial 911. Information that we need is your location and the location, of course, of the car, obviously, that you're calling in. And again, as good a description as you can give. If you're good at vehicle makes and years, then please give us that. And of course, the all-important license number that you can give us. And then the dispatcher will ask you to describe the type of erratic driving. Then the nearest patrol will be dispatched. Many times we'll even patch over and get an assist from the Florida Highway Patrol. So again, call it in. Do not intervene yourself. Remember, you are not a law enforcement officer. In today's world especially, you do not know what you might encounter with a confrontation with some driver. It could turn into road rage. And remember, a vehicle is thousands of pounds of weapon. And you'll always come out on the short end of the stick if you get into that sort of confrontation with another driver. So again, dial 911. Make a color of the vehicle and the all-important license number and your location and exactly what the driver of that vehicle is doing. And then again, if you want to follow or they ask you to follow, make sure that it's at a safe distance back. Again, we don't want you to end up in an accident.
Is it hard to be a sheriff deputy? And what are the qualifications for it?
Well, the qualifications are basic. You have to be 21 years old, complete the academy. We ask that you have a Florida driver's license, and so many of the qualifications are set not by us, but by the state. And of course, you have to attend here locally. It's called George Stone, which is one of our vocational academies here in Escambia County, and that's actually ran by the superintendent of schools, Malcolm Thomas. And once you complete the academy, then you come to the Escambia County Sheriff's Office and you go through what we call a local upgrade training program. You're assigned to a field training officer, an FTO, and you have additional weeks of training that you have to do there. And once you complete all that, then you're basically fully certified as a law enforcement officer. You have to sit for and pass a state examination, which is part of that process. Then the real hard part begins, and that's where you'll work shift work for several years before you're eligible for promotion, or you get what we call a day shift. So it's tough to be a sheriff's deputy today. Just the work schedule itself and the training that's required, because once you're done with all that, it's not over. We have continuing education requirements, and deputies are always being trained in the latest changes to the law. They have to go to the range and qualify annually. So the training and the education never stops as a deputy sheriff. And then on top of that, we have to deal with people that, really don't have our best interest at heart. They want to bring or do harm to our community. Some sell drugs, some abuse children and women, and I should say spouses. And so it's deputies that stand between that bad person and you. So it's very, very difficult to be a deputy. And also today, many times we don't get a lot of really good press, and people don't hear about the good things that deputies do, like Milkshake with a Cop, where you get to come out and see deputies in a whole different light. So yes, when you see deputies, just remember that like everyone else, while they have to have a smile on their face and always be courteous in every situation, they too may be having a bad day. So if you see a law enforcement officer, just to thank you for what you do goes a long way.
So I really want to get a ride along. How do I get one, and how long do I get to be in the car?
Katie has asked how she can do a ride along at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, and if so, how long does the ride along last? Katie, you have to come down and fill out some paperwork, as you can well imagine. We have some criteria, as with most things, that you have to go through. We will do a quick criminal history background on anyone requesting to ride at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. That means we want to make sure that you don't have a criminal history or there aren't any active wants or warrants out for you. As you can well imagine, we want to be very careful. We don't want someone who's, say, under a domestic violence restraining order riding with one of our officers and gathering information on possibly where his victim could reside or live. And yes, we have had those instances where people wanted to ride with the sheriff's office only to gather information about a citizen that they otherwise would not have had access to. When we sign your paperwork and you're approved, you can do up to 4 ride-alongs in one given year. Again, we don't allow relatives to ride with current officers because we want to keep that separation between the two. And normally it's dependent upon the shift and the supervisor. Some of our shifts dependent upon the activity that night and your willingness to stay, and again the calls that they respond to. You can do 8 or 10 hours with an officer. Mostly though, ride-alongs will go somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. And again, if the shift load that night is very heavy, for your safety, they may ask you, to terminate the ride at that point, and you'll be brought back to the sheriff's office or wherever you've picked up your vehicle if you happen to pick them up at one of the precincts. So again, there's a lot of factors involved there, but normally people get to see enough of the law enforcement work that they want to see in their ride-along. We would also encourage you to go to our Citizens Law Enforcement Academy to learn more about law enforcement. You get to interact with a lot of people at the sheriff's office under those circumstances. We have our investigators come in and they'll brief on the homicides. Our crime scene folks come in and tell you how they collect evidence. Our PIO folks tell you how they get together and develop our press releases and how much information we can release at particular times. And so you get a really broad look at what a sheriff's office does, or really a law enforcement agency does. So in addition to your ride-along, we'd ask that you consider doing the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy. You can find out when the next class starts by going online at escambiaso.com and gather all the information you need to apply to be a member of that course. Remember, you can also email your questions and ask the sheriff at escambiaso.com. We'll be back next week right here on Blab TV Tuesday night at 8 p.m.